Good evening, Suki Hotu. Welcome to another session of the Awakening series. Today, 12th of July, we will be sharing the Awakening series number 5. And the topic is Awakening of the Bodhisatta Part 2. Last week, not last week, 2 weeks ago, we had the Awakening of the Bodhisatta Part 1 during Awakening series number 4. So today is a continuation of that same topic, extending to talk about the final moments of the awakening of Siddhartha to become the Sammāsaṃbodhi. So without further ado, let us all begin. Now, those of you who have just joined in, please feel free to click the like so that we can register who has joined us. And if you have any comments, please feel free to key into the comments under the post. And at the same time, if you have any questions, please enter your questions there. Okay. Basically, we're talking about the awakening of the Bodhisatta Siddhartha to become the Sammāsaṃbodhi. This is the awakening to Buddhahood. Before we go further, I would like to share with you this very useful link. Please apply this link to download a document, which is the PowerPoint slides, to go with today's sharing so that you can follow the sharing with the slides from this link. All right. So let us all begin. When we speak of awakening to Buddhahood, this is basically the path to Buddhahood. And when we say Buddhahood, we are using the important word Buddha. The word Buddha came from the root word, the Pali root word bodh. Right? Bodh basically means to wake up or to awaken. Awaken from what? Awaken from the dream of existence. Basically, all of us who are living in this samsaric world, we are so attached to existence, right? So our mind is constantly thinking of existence. So our mind is working in what is called existential way. So we have to break away from that. And basically, the awakening process is to break away from this clinging on to this existence. That would be the awakening to Buddhahood. And to awaken basically means to fully comprehend the realities of life and fully comprehending anicca, dukkha, anatta. These are the 3 marks of realities of life. And when a person becomes awakened, he becomes an arahant, one awakened from the dream of existence, having broken the 10 fetters to existence. So there are 10 fetters that bind us to existence, and when you are able to break all 10 of them, then you would become an arahant, to become awakened. And when we speak of awakening, there are basically three categories of Buddhahood. Right? At the highest level, the supremely awakened one is one who is self-awakened, and such a person would become the teacher of men and gods. So this is what we call a Sammāsaṃbodhi. Such a Sammāsaṃbodhi comes one in many, many aeons. They don't happen often. So the last one came 2,600 years ago, and that was Gautama Buddha. But before him, it was known that there were altogether, including Gautama Buddha, there were 28 according to the Theravadan tradition. So there had been a number of Buddhas, Sammāsaṃbodhis in the past. And each Sammāsaṃbodhi comes only when the Dhamma is completely lost. Then a Buddha will appear to bring back the Dhamma to humanity. Now that is the supremely awakened Buddha. Right? Then at the next category, we have those who are awakened through the guidance of such a Buddha. That means those who learn from a Sammāsaṃbodhi or have learned from a teacher to become awakened. Such a Buddha would be called the Savaka Buddha. or they are all arahant basically, right? Arahant means one who has broken the bonds. So these are all arahants, and in Theravadan tradition, we also use the term Buddha interchangeably. So this is the second category of Buddhahood, Savaka Buddha, one who became awakened under the guidance of a teacher who is usually the Sammāsaṃbodhi. So in other words, during the Buddha's time, all his disciples who become enlightened, they are Savaka Buddha. And all those who follow the teachings of the Buddha and became enlightened after that are also called Savaka Buddha, because the Gautama Buddha left behind the teaching, and we know that he has guided us through this eightfold way. And through the eightfold way, people can practice and realize and gain fruition and become enlightened. But there's also a third category of Buddhas. They are called the Pachika Buddha. These are people who have found their own way to become enlightened, self-awakened, but they are not supremely awakened in the sense that they don't go around teaching men and gods. They don't normally help others to become enlightened. They often live in solitude and they are recluse usually. They don't travel around and teach, unlike the Sammāsaṃbodhi. So today we are talking about the awakening of the Sammāsaṃbodhi, a continuation of that. We spoke about that to some extent 2 weeks ago during the Awakening series number 4. So now in number 5, we will complete the story of how Bodhisatta Gautama became awakened, right? Or Bodhisatta Siddhartha. Gautama is the family name, Siddhartha is his first name, his lay name before he became enlightened. After he became enlightened, he was no longer called Siddhartha. He was often also called Gautama Buddha or Buddha Gautama. Right? So basically, awakening from the dream of existence, we are going to use this book, the Level 3 Arya Magga Bhavana Meditation Guide by Bhante Punnaji, Level 3. And for just this next couple of slides, I'm referring to that section on awakening from the dream of existence, found from page 45 to page 54. But I'm skipping to page 54 where the summary is, and Bhante Punnaji basically pointed out about the two types of, two ways of awakening, right? So he basically say the first way is to awaken through insight, and this is called Panya Vimutti. Panya is insightful wisdom. Some people translate Panya as wisdom. Some people translate it as insight. Some people translate it as insightful wisdom. So I think insightful wisdom is perhaps a more complete term for the word Panya. So, and Vimutti simply means liberation, emancipation, right? Deliverance. There are 3 words often used to translate Vimutti. Deliverance is one of them. Liberation is another. And basically, and emancipation is the third one. Basically, it is freedom from all suffering. To attain this state of Panya, insightful wisdom. So a person who is awakened through that is awakened through Panya Vimutti. But that was not how Gautama Buddha became awakened. He became awakened in the other way, which we'll talk about now shortly. This is the way that the Buddha taught his students, his disciples, how to become awakened. And basically, most of the Arahant became awakened through this method, awakened through insight, and that is Panya Vimutti. That is through the Eightfold Way. And it basically involves going through the 4 jhanas, right? And then, sorry, that is the first one, going through the Eightfold Way. The second one, for one who goes through the 4 jhanas and then enters into the Arupa Samadhi, that means the imageless samadhis, the ayatanas, they're called the ayatanas, and then completely stops the mind that would be called Sanya Vedayita Nirodha. And then upon waking up from that, such a person would become enlightened. And this is a very high way of enlightening. And basically, Gautama Buddha became awakened through this method. And this is actually called double awakening, or awaken in both ways. Right? So a person who tries to be awakened through this method, so a person who has gone through the 4 jhanas and went into the ayatanas, right, the Arupa Samadhis, but did not reach the state of stopping the mind, that person would be called effectively liberated, Cetto Vimutti. But this person is not normally considered as a Buddha, right? So that is basically what the Bhante Punnaji explained. Right? So let's take a look at the normal way that the disciples of the Buddha would become awakened. So basically, people who become awakened in this manner are the Savaka Buddhas, the people who become awakened through the teachings of the Buddha. So that is called Panya Vimutti, awakening through insight. It basically entails a person who understands and practices and adheres to the supernormal Eightfold Way. Following the Eightfold Way, then the person learns how to abandon the 5 hindrances, and having abandoned the 5 hindrances, the person enters into jhanas, right? Cultivating the 5 constituents of jhanas, the jhanangas, and then enter into the 4 jhanas. The 4 jhanas are what we call Rupa Samadhi, right? Whereas when we are not in jhana, like as we are now in the conventional world, we are actually in the kama bhava. That means the sensual world. When you enter into jhana, you will be in the Rupa bhava. That is the imagery world. And going beyond that would be imageless. But those who enter into jhana, they will enter into this imagery world. Rupa Rupa bhava. And Bhante calls them ecstasy. He will explain later on the meaning of ecstasy. We spoke about that 2 weeks ago also. And then at the 4th jhana, when one has gone through the 4 jhanas, at the 4th jhana, then the jhana deepens and one attains a state of upekkha. Upekkha is what Bhante calls apperception. And from that point, a person then gains the necessary conditions to become awakened. And one of the necessary conditions is the person must gain full comprehension of the realities of life. And this full comprehension is called Vedasana, what Bhante explained as Vedasana. You can find that in the book, so I won't be repeating what Bhante was saying about Vedasana. Basically, the slight difference between Vedasana and Vipassana is the practice of seeing through the mind, not seeing with your eyes, seeing through the mind of the realities of life. And being able to see, that is Vipassana, because Passana means seeing. Vedasana is deeper than that. It actually is the full comprehension of what you are seeing. So Vedasana is gaining full comprehension. When you gain full comprehension, you then attain this insightful wisdom called Panya. And with that insightful wisdom, Panya, you then become free from suffering. You become enlightened. You become fully emancipated. Vimutti. Right? So you become fully emancipated from the dream of existence. So such a person would then become Savaka Buddha if he has learned all this from the Gautama Buddha, from the Buddha Dhamma. And that's because this is coming through the Eightfold Way. Right? So such a person became enlightened through the teachings of a teacher, right? Through the teacher. Now, you notice there when I mentioned Panya, I also mentioned Vijja. There's a slight, very subtle, well, it's not really different. It's more or less like 2 sides of the same coin. Panya is talking about having this insightful wisdom. Vijja is describing the condition whereby you fully know all that is happening. Full knowledge, and this includes the knowledge of what they call the ultimate realities, right? Full knowledge. So basically, it's two sides of the same coin. In this context, when we speak of awakening and we talk about Panya and Vijja, they are two sides of the same coin. One is insightful wisdom, the other is having full knowledge. Vijja, as you can see, is the opposite of avijja. Avijja means the absence of full knowledge or the absence of knowledge. One who does not know, that is avijja. Right? The person who doesn't know, then he is experiencing avijja. But of course, unfortunately, the Westerners like to translate avijja as avijja basically as ignorance. Now, it's really not ignorance. It's basically one who doesn't know. Ignorance perhaps is one of the conditions, but it also means a person who doesn't know is experiencing avijja. So that's the difference between Panya and Vijja. I hope that is clear. And this is basically the first way of becoming awakened. Panya Vimutti, awakening through insight. The other way is supreme awakening. And this is the way that Gautama Buddha, or rather Bodhisatta Siddhartha, through many lives, and not just only in one lifetime, through many lifetimes, gained this double awakening. I shall not attempt to pronounce that word, but basically it means double awakening, and we shall see why it's double awakening. Over many lifetimes, as some of you may know the story of past lives of Siddhartha, when the first time he met a Sammāsaṃbodhi, he was a young ascetic by the name of Sumedha. He met the Buddha Dipankara, and from that time he vowed to develop, practice and develop the 10 perfections, the 10 parami. He learned that from Dipankara Buddha. And over many, many lives, right? After many lifetimes, that person eventually was born as Siddhartha. And as Bodhisatta Siddhartha, then he went on to become fully enlightened, supremely awakened as the Gautama Buddha, Sammāsaṃbodhi. So when during the last days of Siddhartha, before he became enlightened, then he practiced very hard and he went beyond the 4 jhanas and went through Upekkha. At this stage, that stage is not yet considered as having become enlightened yet. And from there, right, Bodhisatta Siddhartha went on to enter into the 4 imageless realm, and this is the Arupa Samadhis. They are also called Arupa Ayatanas. And I will show you later on why they're called Arupa Ayatanas, because that's the name. They're not jhanas. Okay? And at that point, he would have experienced what is called effectively liberated. So Ceto Vimutti. Then this is basically deliverance by mind, right? So basically the deliverance by mind is Ceto Vimutti. From there, then Bodhisatta Siddhartha went on to reach that ultimate state of stopping the mind, absolutely stopping the mind. And that process, now the process is called Sanya Vedayita Nirodha. Sanya Vedayita Nirodha refers to the process of stopping the mind, bringing the mind to a complete stoppage. There is no mind anymore. The mind is stopped, right? So, and basically emerging from that, then the person becomes awakened as the Buddha. And from that moment, the Buddha, emerging from this stopping of the mind, witness the process of creation. And this is Paticca Samuppada, concurrence of logical antecedents. Basically, the commentary has mentioned that there were 3 phases of the night. But actually, I'm not too sure how accurate that is. That's basically commentary. And in the first phase, first wake of the night, the Bodhisatta freed himself from all the defilements. And in the second wake of the night, the Bodhisatta then gained the powers to see his past lives and also the past lives of other beings. And then in the third wake of the night, he then was evaluating, going in depth into Paticcasamuppāda. That was in the commentary. But here, we're just skipping that part of it, not trying to link with the commentary. What Bhante Punnaji has explained to me is that the way the Buddha became enlightened is that he reached the state of stopping the mind, and that is Sanya Vedayita Nirodha. When did that happen? Not sure. Because this state of stopping the mind can last for 7 days. So in other words, Bodhisatta Siddhartha could be in this state of having stopped the mind for up to 7 days. Not just one night, you know. So I don't know how that relates to what was said in the commentary. So we forget about the commentary. Let's continue with the point that Bhante Punnaji explained, that this is how Gautama Buddha became enlightened. Right? As Bodhisatta Siddhartha, he stopped the mind, and when he awoke from that, he witnessed that whole process of Paticcasamuppāda, stage by stage, how it arises, right? One after another, the 12 stages arising one after another. He was seeing all that, right? He was able to comprehend all that. By that time, he was already the Sammāsaṃbodhi, because the moment he woke up from Sanya Vedayita Nirodha, he already became the Sammāsaṃbodhi. So that is how basically the Bodhisatta Siddhartha became awakened, through this double awakening. So we're going to look through that whole process today. Now let's take a look very quickly at the progressive development of Samadhis. Right? So in our normal conventional world, we learn the Eightfold Way. And from there, we learn all the necessary techniques and methods to meditate, to practice sila, and to cultivate this virtuous morality, and then meditate. And from this process, we begin to learn to abandon the 5 hindrances. This is still happening in the conventional world. The karma bhava. This is sensual realm. There are 3 realms. Sensual realm, karma bhava. Imagery realm, that is rupa bhava. And then imageless realm, then the arupa bhava. Okay. So in the conventional world, that is the sensual realm, karma bhava. And having abandoned the 5 hindrances, then one begins to develop these 5 constituents of jhanas. So in other words, the 5 jhanangas. And that is vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, and ekagata. So I already explained about the development of the 5 jhanangas and then entering into the jhanas in the previous awakening series number 4. So I won't elaborate on that further. Then when a person enters into jhana, then there are these 4 jhanas. And then the person in jhana state, that person's mind is in the imagery realm, rupa bhava. And in the imagery realm, there are 4 jhanas to be experienced. The jhana is really a gradual reduction of the affective process. We already spoke about, we have 2 mental processes going on. The affective process, which is normally called emotions or the emotional mind. And then the other one is the cognitive process, mano, which is referred to as the thinking mind or the learning mind, okay, or the rational mind, the cognitive mind. So that is cognitive process. This is the affective process, basically talking about the part of the mind that we commonly call emotions. So this is emotional mind. So in the jhana is that gradual reduction. Actually, it's more than just a reduction. It's the final stopping of chitta, the emotional mind. And this ends in chitta, mano. Now, normally in our sensual realm, in karma bhava, in our daily life, our emotional mind and our thinking mind are always in conflict. Emotional mind wants things, whereas the thinking mind is rational and is able to discern right from wrong. But the two are often in conflict. When in jhana, these two begin to merge, to become unified, right? The two minds become one. So it's unified. And that process of unification is that fifth jhananga called ekagata, the unification of the mind. So when in jhana, then the chitta completely stops and becomes unified with mano. So the chitta is no more. In other words, we no longer have two mental processes going on. We just have one, which is the mind, right? So it's neither affective process nor the cognitive process. It's both combined into one. There is no longer emotions. So this is what happens in jhana. Right? And going beyond that, and that's what happened with the Bodhisatta Siddhartha. He went beyond that. After the 4 jhanas, he went on to the Arupa Bhava, going through those 4 stages of Arupa Bhava. And you can see those names there. That's why they're called ayatanas. They are called Arupa ayatanas. So they are happening in the Arupa Bhava. Some people call this the Arupa Samadhis. One thing it is not, a lot of people mistakenly, and I must repeat, mistakenly call these jhanas. They are not jhanas. I don't know why they use the word jhana to refer to this. These are ayatanas. Then they call this the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th jhanas. So these are not jhanas. These are ayatanas. Right? Arupa ayatanas, or basically Arupa Samadhis. Jhanas are samadhis. These are also samadhis. In this process, it is, I'll come to that. In this process, it's the gradual reduction of the cognitive process, the mano. So now in the imageless realm, in experiencing the Arupa ayatanas, the mano begins to reduction of mano until it is stopped. And it is stopped when it reaches Sanya Vedayita Nirodha. And that is when the mano is completely stopped. Cessation of all sensation and feeling. Absolutely stopping of the mind. That process is Sanya Vedayita Nirodha. And that's what Bodhisatta Siddhartha accomplished. Reaching that, the mind has stopped, and awakening from that, he became the Sammasaṃbodhi. Now let's just look more closely into that last part, the imageless realm. The gradual reduction of mano, gradual reduction of the cognitive process, which means cognition completely stops eventually. And there are 4 stages before it stops completely. Right? The first stage is it enters into the realm of infinite space. Now, I'm not going to try to explain this because it's quite difficult to explain using conventional words, because it's really not easy to explain this. This is really not something conventional. But Bhante Punnaji will explain it. I will play the video and try to explain that. So using conventional words, it's very hard to explain this process. Realm of infinite space, realm of infinite perception, realm of nothingness, and then realm of neither sensation nor no sensation. This is the 4th stage in this Arupa Samadhi. In this stage, realm of neither sensation nor no sensation, the mind is at the threshold of stopping completely. In other words, it's so subtle, you cannot say there is any sensation or feeling, nor you say there is none. It's neither having nor not having. It's so subtle. It's very faint. So this is really that final state. And then going to that final absolute stopping of the mind, cessation of feeling, cessation of sensation and feeling, Sanya Vedayita Nirodha. Okay. So let's look through this gradual reduction of the cognitive process one by one. So here, again, I'm bringing out Bhante Punnaji's writing. You can find this in that same chapter I referred to earlier in that book, Arya Magga Bhavana Level 3. So basically, Bhante was saying that this reduction of cognitive experience, this gradual reduction of cognitive experience begins when the mind enters into these Arupa Samadhis. And in the Arupa Samadhi, in the Arupa Samadhi, the mind goes through one stage after another, but as it enters into one stage, as it enters into the next stage, it has to let go the previous stage. And Bhante Punnaji has described that as like going up the stairs or steps. As you go up the steps, when you take the next step, you have to let go the previous step. You can't cling on to the previous step and move on to the next step, right? If you cling on to the previous step to try to move to the next step, you are not advancing. You're still clinging on, attached to the previous step. So here, these 4 different stages of ayatanas, when you enter into the next one, you have to let go the previous one. And that's really what's happening in these 4 stages, right? So now I'm going to use Bhante's explanation a lot. So I'll play through that. So Bhante will be explaining all this.
When we begin to stop this cognitive, the subjective experience, we are left with seeing. And when the seeing has also stopped, what do we see? When the seeing has stopped, the only thing that we can see is what we call empty space. So empty space is also an object to be seen. And then we begin to become aware of empty space. And empty space, does it have a length or a breadth or a depth? There is no such thing. So that means the empty space has no limit. And if it has no limit, it is called infinite, infinite. So that is called the infinity of space. The infinity of space. That is all that we can see. And when we become aware of this infinity of space, we see it as an object. And when we begin to look at this infinity of space, is it really an object? We begin to see that the infinity of space is a subjective experience. So, we begin to focus on the subjective experience, which is seeing. Seeing is the subjective experience. So what we thought was an objective experience is really a subjective experience, which is seeing. And that seeing itself has no limit, and therefore it is also infinite. It is infinite perception.
Okay, let's go through what Bhante said. Right? He basically said stopping of this objective experience. Now, I noticed in the video, Bhante actually, I think maybe he slipped a little bit. He said stopping of subjective experience. No, it was stopping of objective experience. So, stopping the objective experience, we are left with the process of seeing. That means objective experience is when we encounter something, and then we are aware there is something out there. So basically, in this state, we are no longer dealing with anything out there, so to speak. So we stopped that already, and that is completely stopped. When we are deep in our attention inwards, we are left only with the process of seeing. He used the word seeing, but I would prefer to use the word perceiving. It's really what he was referring to is seeing with the mind, looking deep within, deep introspection. When the seeing has stopped, or the perceiving has stopped, we perceive only empty space. Now we are not really perceiving objects anymore. We're perceiving empty space. And we consider this empty space as though it's an object, but it's really not an object. Right? It is to be perceived. This empty space has no dimensions. It is limitless. It is infinite. Right? So therefore, it becomes infinite space. And this is the infinity of space. And at that stage, this is the first stage of the Arupa Samadhi, or the first stage of the Ayatana, right? So Akasanya Chayatana, okay? So this is the first stage of the Ayatanas, Arupa Ayatanas. And then, being aware of this infinity of space, right, we perceive it as an object, but it's really not an object. It is a subjective experience, meaning it's within, right? Infinity of space is only a subjective experience. So this is the experience within. We're still experiencing this subjective experience. In focusing on this subjective experience of perceiving, then there is only the experience of perceiving. Now this is important. Repeat that. In focusing on this subjective experience of perceiving, there is only the experience of perceiving. So it's like in the process of seeing something, there is only the seeing. That's really what it is. So in the process of perceiving this subjective experience, that experience within, then there is only the experience of perceiving. There is no self, there is no perceiver, there is no perceived objects, right? That is just the process of perceiving. This experience of perceiving is infinite again. So this perceiving has no limit. And therefore, this is the second stage of the ayatanas. So infinite perception. Vijnana Chayatana. Right? Pardon my pronunciation of Pali words. It's not very good. So basically, this is the first two stages. Let's go on to look at the other thing. Then here I'm showing you the third one. This is the third stage, the realm of nothingness. When one has gone beyond, when one has gone beyond infinite perception, then one goes into realm of nothingness. Right? And this is basically the level where Siddhartha's two teachers, before he became enlightened, he had two teachers, Alara Kalama and Uddaka Ramaputta. Those two teachers had already attained this state, realm of nothingness. Right?
When this Prince Siddhartha went to learn from two teachers called Anuttarā Sammāsaṃbodhi and Untitled Chapter. Both Anuttarā Sammāsaṃbodhi and Untitled Chapter had reached only that point. That is ultimately awareness of nothing. Akinchanyāyatana. Now the Buddha wanted to, Prince Siddhartha, the Bodhisatta, wanted to go further. Now if there is nothing, you are aware of nothing, so you want to give up even the awareness of nothing. And so, it was the Uddaka Putta means the disciple of Uddaka. So the Uddaka Putta told the prince, my teacher had reached a higher state than this. I have not reached that state. If you like, I can tell you what he told me, and you can try to experience that state. So he said, okay. And he listened to him and then tried and gave up even that awareness of nothing. So he came to that stage called neither sensation nor no sensation. Neva sanya na sanyāyatana. Sanya is the sensation. You can't say there is a sensation, you can't say there is no sensation. It's the ultimate limit. That is called the threshold of perception. You know what the threshold means. When you come out of that door and stand just at the door, that is what is called the threshold. So you have come to the threshold of perception. Now, he wanted to go beyond that. He wanted to get out. But there was no one to teach him how to do that. So he thought, well, that is the end of what I can achieve here. So he thought, I will try and join the ascetics who are trying to give pain to their bodies and discomfort. And he went and joined those 5 ascetics. And there he started fasting. He stopped eating, and he stopped eating to such an extent that his body became like a skeleton. Still, he couldn't find the ultimate solution.
So first, Siddhartha went to the first teacher, Alara Kalama, and learned and attained the realm of nothingness, which is exactly the same fruition that Alara Kalama experienced. So the two are now equal. And Alara Kalama asked Siddhartha to stay on, but Siddhartha decided that he wanted to pursue further, go further. He knew that there were more to be accomplished. So he left Alara Kalama and went to the next teacher, and that is Uddaka Ramaputta. Uddaka Ramaputta, actually his first name is Uddaka. He's the son of a great teacher called Rama. So Siddhartha went to learn from him, and even Uddaka Ramaputta also attained the same state, the realm of nothingness. But the father of Uddaka Ramaputta, which is the father Rama, the teacher Rama, left behind instructions how to attain the next level, because the father Rama during his lifetime had attained that. There was no mention whether Rama was alive, so basically we assume that Rama was no longer around because he left the instructions behind with his son. And Uddaka Ramaputta taught it to Siddhartha, and Siddhartha was able to attain that. The realm of neither sensation nor no sensation. This is really at the threshold of stopping the mind already. As I mentioned, that very subtle state. So since Siddhartha had attained that, he already was better than or higher than, he had attained the fruition higher than Uddaka Ramaputta. So there was no point for him to hang around there, and he decided to go on to pursue that ultimate stopping of the mind. So he left Uddaka Ramaputta and joined the ascetics. So basically, this realm of nothingness, both teachers had already attained, and learning from the father of Uddaka Ramaputta, the instructions or the method to attain the realm of neither sensation nor no sensation, Siddhartha had attained that. This is the threshold of perception. And then he went on to practice asceticism. He wanted to pursue beyond that. So he left and went to practice asceticism, thinking that this extreme self-mortification was the way to reach that ultimate stopping of the mind. Because you're thinking of stopping the body to stop the mind. So that's why they practice this extreme self-mortification. And he was joined by 5 other fellow ascetics. So together they tried to practice that stopping of the mind. So when Siddhartha went to practice this asceticism, he was still not able to reach that ultimate state of stopping the mind. He had done the most extreme. So let's look at some of the videos that is explaining that.
Siddhartha travelled further on his search into northern India. He was looking for an alternative way of life that attempted to overcome the suffering he'd seen around him. He was interested in all the new philosophies, but he wanted to go further, to reach deeper into his mind. He now decided to focus on the technique of meditation and sought out the leading gurus of the day.
There have been, broadly speaking, 2 kinds of meditation in ancient India, which consisted in putting yourself under various kinds of pressure by controlling your breathing, or sometimes fasting, or undergoing other forms of discomfort. And the aim is really to obtain what we would call altered states of consciousness, so that they would think that they had climbed to very high planes in the universe. They're not taking this quite literally. It's not that they think that they go 5,000 feet up in the air, so to speak, but they think that there are certain planes which become more and more abstract, such things as the plane of the infinity of space, and that's followed by the plane of the infinity of consciousness as you go up, then the plane of the infinity of nothingness. These were the sort of things that the Buddha definitely must have learnt from his teachers.
It is said that Siddhartha so excelled at meditating that he attracted a group of 5 followers, and his teachers asked him to stay on and take over their schools. But Siddhartha decided that this practice alone was not the answer to the problem of suffering and rebirth or reincarnation. He set out to explore other techniques, this time focusing on his body.
So he then goes to try another method of harsh asceticism. This involved things like fasting, not washing, meditations where you just hold your breath for a very long time, and it's very kind of forceful, willful way.
Ascetics may starve and even mutilate themselves. For them, the physical body is a barrier to spiritual liberation. By shedding their attachment to the body, they will cleanse the mind and liberate the soul. Siddhartha tried to achieve this state of liberation. He fasted for so long, his life hung by a thread. All my limbs became like the knotted joints of withered creepers, my buttocks like a bullock's hoof, my protruding backbone like a string of balls, my gaunt ribs like the crazy rafters of a tumble-down shed. My eyes lay deep in their sockets, their pupils sparkling like water in a deep well. As an unripe gourd shrivels and shrinks in the hot wind, so became my scalp.
Basically, he had gone deep into the practice of extreme self-mortification, and he found it didn't work. He was not able to stop the mind. He stopped eating, and actually, in fact, he went all the way to stop breathing, and that was when he fainted, nearly died from that, because his body had become so thin, it was like skin wrapping the bones. So eventually, he reached a point where he gave up asceticism, knowing that it didn't seem to provide him the ability to stop the mind, because he had tried stopping breathing, and when he stopped breathing, that was when he finally fainted. And then when he was awakened from the fainting, there was this young lady who passed by, Lady Sujata, who offered alms food, or offered the food for him, and he recovered from that after taking the food. And then he started to recall that during his childhood, he was able to meditate successfully even as a young 9-year-old child, right? And he also recalled, by that time, he had some ability to recall some past. And he also recalled that he was trying to practice the 10 paramitas, the 10 paramis, the 10 perfections.
So he thought, how there is only one more thing to do, I will stop breathing. So he stopped breathing. And when he stopped breathing, ultimately he fainted, and everyone thought he was dead. But somehow he woke up from that state. And when he woke up, he began to think, all these days I have been trying to learn from other people. I have been trying to do what other people do, and it didn't work. And then he recalled when he was a small child, when there was a ceremony called the ploughing ceremony. All the babysitters and the people who were looking after the child became interested in that ceremony, and he was left alone. At that moment, he entered the first jhana. Why did he enter the first jhana? It was not something that he did. He had been practicing what are called the paramitas for many lives, innumerable lives. So he had already purified his mind. His mind was free of all the hindrances, the 5 hindrances. And as a result, he automatically entered the first jhana. When he remembered this, he thought, this is the right way. I will follow this method, and that was to give up, let go of everything.
He reached the point where it didn't work, and finally he abandoned asceticism, giving up asceticism, and discovered the medial way. This is where he realized that in his conventional life as a prince in the palace, he was enjoying sensual pleasure. So that is one extremity to be avoided. Now, having practiced asceticism and realizing that it didn't work, he also pointed out that one should abandon, or one should not steer towards asceticism. And he gave up, and he discovered the middle way, or medial way.
Just as Siddhartha was about to die of starvation, a young girl saved his life by giving him a bowl of rice and milk. He now realized that if he starved himself again, he would simply die, having achieved nothing.
The story says that he's living on 1 grain of rice a day. I mean, he's practically starved himself to death, and realizes that disciplining the body through extreme self-renunciation, asceticism, of inflicting pain upon the body, that doesn't solve the problem.
When his 5 followers saw Siddhartha had given up his fast, they lost faith in him. They no longer believed he had the strength to live up to his spiritual convictions, and abandoned him.
Feels he's tried what's on offer. They haven't worked. And it's at this stage he remembers meditation that he went into spontaneously in his teens, and he thinks, maybe that is a way through to awakening, because it's not taken up the desires of the body, but it is very joyful and happy.
By chance, Siddhartha came across a musician tuning his sitar. When the string was too slack, it would not play. When it was too tight, it snapped. Somewhere in the middle lay tuneful harmony. Siddhartha realized that this simple observation signified something of great importance. It was the middle way that would lead him to the state of mind he was looking for, to a state of tuneful harmony, enlightenment. But how could he achieve it?
And the way that the Buddha eventually uses is what one could call mindfulness or awareness of the body, which neither ignores it nor tries to forcefully master it. It's a kind of middle way.
The middle way led Siddhartha through the countryside. He had been travelling for 6 years. He had experienced pain and suffering and had stretched the boundaries of his mind. But he'd still not found the inner peace and harmony he was searching for. The state of absolute wisdom and everlasting bliss, known as enlightenment. Siddhartha arrived at Bodh Gaya. Here his torment would end. He sat down beneath a tree and vowed not to leave until he had reached enlightenment. Flesh may decay, bones may fall apart, but I will never leave this place until I find the way to enlightenment.
He's no longer giving himself a hard time, he's not stressing himself unbearably, he's not undergoing anything painful. He thinks, well, life is painful enough without taking the trouble to make it more painful, but let me just calmly think things out, think of how life works.
He starts to focus the mind by attention to the slow movement of the breath coming in and going out, and to the refined sensation which exists in the body, perhaps just around the nose, in a way which starts to lead to the mind quietening, stilling, settling, gathering, purifying.
All right. Now, I would like to share with you this important sutra. I won't read it, but you can go ahead and read it. Look for it. Google it in Sutra Central or Access to Insight. Majjhima Nikaya 36, the Maha Sāccaka Sutra, the longer discourse with Sāccaka, where the Buddha explained during the time when he was Prince Siddhartha and during those period where he was going into asceticism, his experience as an ascetic. There you will find he mentioned how he became disillusioned with asceticism. So you can read about it. All right, moving on. So now we're talking about reaching this final state of stopping the mind. Bhante Punnaji calls this insentience. Right? So the process that leads to the stopping of the mind, Sanya Vedayita Nirodha, reaches the point where the mind completely stops. It can stay stopped for up to 7 days. And this is a state of insentience. Okay.
He had been practicing what are called the paramitas for many lives, innumerable lives. So he had already purified his mind. His mind was free of all the hindrances, the 5 hindrances. And as a result, he automatically entered the first jhana. When he remembered this, he thought, this is the right way. I will follow this method, and that was to give up, let go of everything. So again, from that point, he gradually gave up everything, and ultimately he reached that same state that he reached while he was following the teachers Alar, Kala, Mundarga. He entered that state called neither sensations nor no sensations. And he gave up that also, and he came to what is called the cessation of feeling and sensation. That is a complete stopping of that activity called mind. He began to understand that what is called the mind is not another entity separate from the body. Most people think mind and body are two entities which are separate. That is not true. What is called the mind is simply an activity of the body. And that activity can be stopped. And so he stopped that activity. So when you stop that activity, the body becomes like a dead body. There is no mind, there is no thinking. But there is a difference between the dead body and this body, where the mental activity has stopped. The difference is there is what is called today in the modern world, it is called metabolism.
So reaching that stopping of the mind, that is a state of insentience. Now we look at that final moment of the awakening of the Bodhisatta, where he absolutely stopped the mind while meditating under the Bodhi tree. But just prior to that, he was being disturbed by Mara, and Mara sent the 3 daughters to disturb him.
Siddhartha's mind was now so focused that he could successfully enter the darkest reaches of his unconscious. It was now that he would face his final and greatest torment. The demon Mara, the lord of ego and illusion, appeared before him. He could make any horror real in Siddhartha's mind.
It's very important to remember that Mara, this demon king, is not like the Christian Satan, because he isn't a tempter and he isn't any kind of counterpart to God. He is purely psychological, the psychological forces which we have within us.
Mara unleashed an army of demons to attack Siddhartha. They fired flaming arrows at him. But mid-flight, Siddhartha turned them into lotus blossoms, and they fell harmlessly around him. Having failed, Mara then tried to seduce Siddhartha with his tempting daughters.
He is assailed by the demon king, who is at the same time death and desire. Very Freudian, that, in a way. Desire is death, death is desire. And in fact, the demon king offers him his 3 daughters, who are both passion or lust and aversion, which is equally bad. If you shy away from it and say, no, that's absolutely disgusting, you're also a slave to passion. And he can be completely calm and indifferent and just gaze at them without any feelings of attraction or repulsion.
The faces of Mara's daughters began to rot before Siddhartha's eyes. The evil daughters then disappeared into the earth.
It is, in fact, you could say, the Buddha's very recognition that Mara is an aspect of himself. The total recognition of that is his enlightenment.
The earth is said to have trembled as he dispelled the devil. Siddhartha, now aged 35, passed through 4 jhanas to reach enlightenment and become the Buddha, or awakened one.
So that was the final moment when Siddhartha eventually became awakened. During that last stage, he was disturbed by the 3 daughters of Mara. Now, I'll let Bhante Punnaji explain to you this state of stopping the mind, and he calls this avijja. The mind being stopped is a insentience.
So 2 things are present. In the dead body, the temperature goes away and the metabolism stops. But in this body, the temperature remains and the metabolism remains. But there is no thinking or consciousness. That state is what I call avijja. The Pali word avijja comes from the root with. With is simply sensation. With Vedana, the word Vedana is also coming from the same root. Vedana is the sensation. And Vijja means the presence of Vedana. But in this particular state, the Vedana has stopped. The sensation has stopped. And therefore it is the absence of Vedana. So I was trying to find a good English word to translate this state. And that is the word insentience. Insentience. The absence of sensitivity. It's called insentience. How the Buddha or the Prince Siddhartha didn't stop, remain in that state for a long time. After some time, he automatically woke up again. And as he woke up, what happened? He began to see how this process of perception creates the world that we are aware of, and ultimately creates also the self that we are aware of. In other words, the objective experience and the subjective experience is created by this process of perception. And with that comes all the sufferings in the world. A detailed description of that is what is called the Paticca Samuppada. It is only by fully understanding this, by becoming aware of it, that you awaken from the dream of existence.
So basically that is how the Bodhisatta Siddhartha started to then witness the whole unfolding of this Paticca Samuppada when he emerged from this state of insentience, having stopped the mind, awakening from it, emerging from this, he had become the Sammāsaṃbodhi, and he was witnessing the entire unfolding of Paticca Samuppada. So that is how the Bodhisatta Siddhartha became awakened as the Sammāsaṃbodhi through this double awakening process where we have already briefly spoke about. And when he became awakened, he then made this statement. This was basically this was something that Venerable Ananda heard from the Buddha, and then it became one of the Dhammapada verse. Right? Basically, it's called the house builder, talking about the house builder. But here, I'm using Bhante Punnaji's translation. It says, through innumerable lives in this vortex of rebirth, did I seek the creator of this grief-ridden world. Never did I find this creator unknown. It is painful to be born again and again. O creator, I have seen you. You will never create again. Your structure is dismantled, the foundations destroyed, the mind has stopped creating, the emotional urge has ceased. This is Bhante Punnaji's translation of that verse, Dhammapada verse 153 and 154. So with that, I end my presentation. Please join us again next week. I will start talking about the Paticca Samuppada, where upon waking up from this state of insentience, the Buddha started to witness how stage by stage this Paticca Samuppada rose and faded away stage by stage. Right? They call this the 12 links of dependent origination. But Bhante likes to call this the concurrence of logical antecedents. So we're going to explore that in great depth starting from next week. So this is the end of the awakening of the Bodhisatta Siddhartha part. So we will start talking about Paticca Samuppada starting next week. So don't miss out on that. All right. Thank you very much for joining us. Please don't forget to download the presentation slides and also this very interesting, very useful book, which is Bhante Punnaji's Advanced Level Meditation Guide, Ariya Magga Bhavana Level 3. If you have any questions, please post them. Otherwise, please email me questions if you think about them later, or contact me via Facebook. All right, and with this, I end my sharing for tonight. We have spent the last 1.5 hours together exactly, and we have accumulated a lot of good merits from these meritorious deeds. We also realize there are a lot of people around the world who are suffering from this coronavirus pandemic. Right? So let us now share our merits with all the people who are suffering. Let us put our palms together and recite this together. We dedicate the merits we have acquired from sharing the Buddha Dhamma to all beings affected by the coronavirus pandemic around the world. May suffering beings be suffering free. May the fear-struck fearless be. May grieving beings shed all grief. May all beings find peace and relief. By the grace of the merits we have acquired, may we never follow the foolish, may we follow only the wise, until we attain the highest and most supreme bliss of Nibbana. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much. I hope you stay safe and may you be well, comfortable, peaceful, and happy. So have a good evening. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.